You take a sip. The warmth spreads through your chest. The noise around you softens just slightly. For a moment, everything feels a little more manageable. You might think that is a very modern experience. It is not even close. The desire to alter your mind with fermented liquid is not a product of civilization. It is not something that came with cities, or writing, or the invention of the weekend. The urge to get drunk is ancient. Deeply, embarrassingly ancient. And the story of how your ancestors first discovered alcohol, and why they kept coming back to it, says something profound about what it means to be human. Let us go back. Not a few centuries. Not a few millennia. Much further, 9 million years ago, before your ancestors were even recognizably human, the primates that eventually became you were living in trees across what is now Africa. The climate was shifting, forests were shrinking, fruit was falling from the trees and landing on the ground. And on the ground, that fruit was fermenting, rotting, producing ethanol, the same molecule in every alcoholic drink you have ever had. A team led by biologist Matthew Kerrigan published a landmark study in 2014 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They analyzed a key enzyme called ADH4. Alcohol dehydrogenase 4, the enzyme that breaks down ethanol in the body. And they discovered that roughly 10 million years ago, a genetic mutation occurred that made this enzyme 40 times more effective at processing alcohol. 40 times. That mutation happened right around the time your ancient ancestors were descending from the trees. Think about what that means. The primates who could metabolize fermented fruit did not get poisoned. They got calories, extra energy, a survival advantage. The ones who tolerated ethanol survived and reproduced. The ones who could not fell behind. Your ability to drink alcohol without dying is not incidental. It is evolution saying, this matters. But tolerating alcohol is not the same as deliberately making it. So when did that happen? The earliest firm archaeological evidence of intentional alcohol production is roughly 9,000 years old. A site called Jiahu in northern China, excavated by archaeologist Patrick McGovern of the University of Pennsylvania, yielded ceramic jars containing chemical residue that analysis identified as a fermented mixture of rice, honey, and wild fruit, a kind of ancient proto-beer or mead. McGovern has spent decades chasing the origins of alcohol in the archaeological record, and he has found evidence of intentional brewing showing up independently across China, the Middle East, and the Americas. Not copied from one culture to another. Invented separately. Over and over. That pattern tells you something important. Alcohol is not an accident of one civilization. It is something human beings converge on whenever they have the resources and time to experiment. It keeps getting reinvented because something in your brain keeps looking for it. But even 9,000 years feels like a polite, sanitized version of the story. Because hunter-gatherers almost certainly knew about fermentation long before they had ceramic jars to store it in. Naturally fermented fruit. Honey left in a hollow tree and accidentally mixed with rainwater. Wild grain soaked in a rock depression and forgotten for a few days. These are not complicated accidents. They happen in nature constantly. And your ancestors, who were extraordinarily observant of their environment, would have noticed. Archaeologist Andrew Curry, writing in National Geographic, pointed to evidence suggesting that the desire to produce alcohol may have actually driven, or at least accelerated, the invention of agriculture itself. This is the counterintuitive twist. You were probably taught that humans invented farming to grow food. But some researchers have argued that the first grain crops may have been grown at least partly to produce beer. Not bread first. Beer first, the site of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. The oldest known monumental structure on Earth, built roughly 11,000 years ago before pottery, before writing, possibly before widespread settled farming, shows evidence of large stone troughs that may have been used for fermenting grain beverages. People gathered, possibly from great distances, to build something enormous together, and they may have drunk together while doing it. Alcohol in that reading was not a byproduct of civilization. It was part of the glue that built it. So why? Why does your brain respond to ethanol at all? What is actually happening? Ethanol crosses your blood-brain barrier quickly. It binds to GABA receptors, the receptors that regulate inhibition in your brain, and it amplifies their effect. The result is that the part of your brain responsible for social anxiety, threat detection, and self consciousness gets quieted. You feel warmer, more open, less guarded. In the context of a small band of hunter gatherers, that effect had a specific social value. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford has studied the social bonding functions of alcohol extensively. His research suggests that moderate shared drinking triggers the release of endorphins, the same neurochemicals released by laughter, singing, and physical touch. Alcohol, in other words, was a social technology, a bonding tool, a way of lowering the walls between people who needed to cooperate to survive. Picture the scene. You are sitting around a fire 10,000 years ago. It is dark, it is cold. The last hunt went badly. 3 people in the group are barely speaking to each other after an argument about territory. Someone passes around a crude clay vessel. Inside is something thick, slightly sour, lightly fizzy. Grain that someone soaked in water and left in the sun too long. You drink. Slowly the silence softens. Someone starts to talk. Someone else laughs. The argument fades for tonight. This is not a scene of weakness. This is social maintenance. This is how you rebuild trust without having the words to describe what trust even is. Fermented drinks also had a practical dimension that your ancestors understood instinctively, even if they could not have explained the chemistry. Water sources in the ancient world were frequently contaminated. Rivers and standing pools carried bacteria, parasites, and pathogens that killed people regularly. Fermented beverages, beer, wine, mead, had alcohol concentrations and acid levels high enough to kill many of those pathogens. Drinking something mildly alcoholic was, in many environments, genuinely safer than drinking water. This was not a coincidence that ancient people missed. Archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia shows that workers on major construction projects, including pyramid builders, received daily beer rations as part of their pay. Not as a luxury, as a nutritional staple and safe hydration source. Beer was sustenance. Wine was medicine. Mead was ceremony. The line between drinking for survival and drinking for pleasure was not clear because it did not need to be. By the time of the earliest written records, Sumerian tablets from roughly 5,000 years ago, alcohol was already fully embedded in culture, religion, and economy. The Sumerians had a goddess of beer named Ninkasi. Her hymn, one of the oldest written texts ever discovered, is literally a recipe for brewing. The divine and the fermented were the same thing. That is where your relationship with alcohol begins, not at a bar, not at a party, not even at a harvest festival. It begins with a primate descending from a tree into a world full of rotting fruit. It continues with a mutation that made your body capable of processing what that fruit had become. It deepens with a human being long before history, noticing that the liquid at the bottom of a certain vessel made the world feel slightly different, and deciding to make more of it on purpose. You take a sip. The warmth spreads through your chest. 9 million years of evolution led to this exact moment. And somewhere in your ancient brain, something very old recognizes exactly what is happening.